What about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
The tricky thing is there's a echo when you speak through the computer.
Everyone needs to turn off their, turn down their sound on their devices. Sorry. And then you mute yourself unless you're going to speak.
Turn down.
But you also have to turn down this volume.
So John, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Okay, but we can't hear him.
What day was the link sent? What was the agenda?
The agenda, you have an agenda in front of you on the table.
Monday. The 22nd.
Monday. Please hold on. We're having some technical difficulty.
Somebody say something.
Can you ask again?
Should I go ahead and speak now? Are you able to hear me?
What kinds of can you guys just turn the sound down on the computer? I think you turn it off. Just mute it.
Turn it all the way down. I turned my sound down.
I think everybody can remute their mics and we'll just go to the owl now that the owl's properly connected.
Got it. Okay, so everybody mute yourselves and the owl will pick up all of our audio. So I would like to go ahead and welcome the committee members. Thank you all for coming. The community, thank you for coming as well. The people that are here in person and on Zoom. And I would like to welcome John Scanlon from the Washington Council, as well as Kim, who is our assistant from Public Works, and this is her last meeting. So thank you, Kim, and we really appreciate you for being here. Have we confirmed that the audience is able to hear us?
We're having a lot.
Sounds
It looks like they can. Okay. Great. Okay, well, Britt, let's be one, you want to report the committee? And can you take a look at your agenda?
You're getting free echo to speak because you're like, that's what you're
I am.
It's the owl speaker. So we can do.
I did it understand over stand off. Like that. Are you hearing now, guys?
The second.
Yes, Rima says yes.
The second item is that we got a request about exchange dates for tickets, and I would like to suggest that we take that up in our August meeting, since tonight we have a lot to talk about with the new ferry. And the other item that we could take up at our August meeting is some follow-up on the question we voted on at our last meeting to request the council to stagger our terms so that there was more carryover. So those two items ordinarily might have come up tonight's agenda, but rather than adding them to tonight, I suggest we add them in August.
I speak to that last point. So I don't know if you've seen it next to Long Island today, but a member of our island brought to the Attorney General's office that people may not be able to get their refunds because they can't be available on 2 dates in August. So we don't have to address it tonight because the state Attorney General's got the county on it.
I will say that on June 28th, Public Works sent out to everyone on the Public Works mailing list about the ferry. This was not to our committee, but to everyone on their mailing list, that Public Works was going to seek community and our committee's input after their last scheduled ticket exchange date of August 3rd. So they already said on June 28th they were going to see community and committee input on subsequent times. So I think they are anticipating adding some.
Okay, I added all those things under the August 28th meeting, and we will address them at that meeting. And also at that August 28th meeting, we will be having Laura Froelich here to introduce to the community. Laura is the new Assistant Director for Public Works, and she will now be the manager over the ferry system. She is now Gary's boss, and the reason she and Gary and the rest of the county staff are not here tonight is that they are all at a ferry summit at Anderson Island in Pierce County. So all the counties that have a ferry are having a ferry summit to share ideas and funding plans and a lot of different things and some electronic ticketing options, which we're all very aware we need after this ticket exchange issues that we've all had. So Laura will bring that information to us when she comes. You can't turn on.
It's just that they're having trouble.
Can you turn up the sound again for the owl, or is it up maximum?
Let me check. We'll work on that.
Okay. I'll try to speak up so that you can all hear me if that's part of the issue here. The next on our agenda, we all got the minutes from the June 5th meeting that you've had a chance to review. Are there any suggestions or adjustments for the June 5th meeting minutes? If they're hearing no comments, those minutes will stand as final. So the next thing we would like to do, we all three, Diane, Catherine, and I, and John Scanlon, were at a Public Works Committee of the Whole meeting yesterday, where the Director of Public Works, Liz Kosa, presented some scenarios for the County Council to consider. And John Scanlon is going to share some thoughts about that meeting. So thank you, John.
I'm going to unmute John.
So now you're going to unmute John.
Thanks, Pam. Can you all hear me?
We cannot hear you yet.
It takes a
Okay.
moment for the mouse to get back over. Just bear with me.
Do that now.
John should be unmuted.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Hey, John?
You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, when I speak, I see that it's
Say something now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I couldn't tell what the answer is. It yes or no?
I can hear you from my computer, but the owl is not.
Do you know where Dan is?
Pardon me?
I'm looking for Dan,
You're looking for Ben?
or Ben, excuse me.
One thing that I have seen done is if you unmute your own computer and let John speak through your computer, amplifier, then the owl might pick it up because the owl is close to your computer speaker.
That must have been about.
So,
I'm just trying to figure out why we
is he
can't.
muted?
No,
No,
he's not
we can
muted.
hear him speak.
We can only hear him through Pam's computer.
Oh, sure.
So if he could speak through Kim's computer, the owl would pick it up.
Sure. So it's like speak.
So you could hear him in the Zoom audience.
So the people out on Zoom could hear him.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a try now, perhaps?
Can you try now, John?
Okay, I'll try again.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay, try one. I think we got it.
Change the volume on this, make it louder.
I think there's just.
Okay, go.
Okay, should I continue?
Yes, thank you so much for your patience.
Okay, thanks everyone. Sorry I couldn't make it in person tonight. I had some meetings running long at the courthouse, so I'm joining remotely tonight. We had the presentation yesterday from Elizabeth Cosa and from the consultants at KPFF that looked at 3 different options. They looked at a new electric ferry going in a single phase. They looked at the option of 2 phases, going with a diesel hybrid first and then doing the conversion to electric later on. And then they looked at the option of replacing the Watcom Chief with an equivalent new boat, but that would be fully diesel and the same number of cars. When you look at those options, there is a lot of gap that's left for taxpayers to pick up. The gap differs based on the different options there. And then they looked at what could we do to help fill that gap. So they looked at various things such as a bond. They looked at local tax revenue via the the ferry district idea that some of us have talked about, and then looked at some options to see if we could potentially get state funding at various levels. There is one scenario in which a single phase electric ferry comes in at lower cost to the taxpayers compared to that in-kind replacement. And that would be only if we were able to get a similar amount of state funding as Skagit got for the Glamis Ferry. I talked about that last night or yesterday afternoon and asked some of the scenarios around that. Councilmember Galloway had a really good point. She was working as a legislative aide when Skagit started going for that funding. It took them 3 or 4 legislative sessions to get that through, and they hired a lobbyist just to work on that, in addition to their own general lobbyist. So it took a big effort to get that done. You know, I had some optimistic thinking, hey, what if we started talking with legislators now, given that we've got a delegation, I think both between the 40th and 42nd that wants to work for this county and has a track record of delivering results for our county in Olympia. So even with that, I think it might be a tough ask to get that through for next year. So what we agreed to do was to have some work sessions with Public Works to go through the different ideas and come up with some options, because we still do have some time. There is some time before we have to make decisions on that big federal grant, the RAISE grant. So we can look through the different options and decide on which way we want to go. I'm mostly interested in hearing from you all on what your take is. Obviously, I recognize that this is, you know, about 24 hours out from what we just saw, and it was, you know, there were some shocking things in there. So, you know, I don't think our initial reactions are always our best, but I am interested in hearing from the committee, you know, over the next few months about what your suggestions are. I saw an email from one community member with some ideas and another option. I know folks have been looking at other options as well. But I'm interested in what you all think about some of these ideas and what it is that we're missing, what it is that we haven't looked at that you think we should be looking at. So I'm mostly here to listen, you know, starting today and over the next few weeks and months to see what ideas that you all have.
So I'm interested in, will it be possible for members of the advisory committee to sit in with some of these work sessions with the council and Public Works?
Yeah, I think the idea that we talked about yesterday was to do these during some of our water work sessions. We have one water work session a month. We've been canceling some of those. Those are public sessions. When a quorum of the council meets, it's an open public meeting. And generally we hold those meetings on one Tuesday a month. That we usually run those meetings from 10 to 12 or 10:30 to 12:30.
So those work sessions would be open?
If we use that time, if it's all of us, they would be open.
We'll reach out to Liz and Laura and let them know that we would definitely like to be part of that effort. Would you suggest that would be a good idea?
Potentially, that could be one way to go. I mean, there may be another way to go. You know, I think sometimes there is value in some of us sitting down together and hashing out some ideas. Because, you know, there's some things people, I think you can get creative in that way sometimes. I mean, we all, you know, sometimes have conversations with friends that we might not, you know, have completely in public. So I think there is some value in council members having some time to hash out some dumb ideas themselves before going out with some really smart ideas. So that could be an option too.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to make sure that the committee has some great ideas that you'll hear tonight, I think, and we just want to make sure that we're part of that effort.
I agree.
Carol, do you have a comment? No. Okay. Thank you so much. So are there any other committee members who would like to make comments about the meeting that we all went to yesterday? Diane?
Can you pull up mine?
I can.
There were 23 slides presented and a lot of detailed information. And for the community, I wanted to highlight three main ideas. And they're actually in the reverse order in which they were presented to the council. So the last slide presented to the council was a timeline on key decision points. And I
just screen shared.
And can you back up to?
It does right here. We can.
Can you clarify who was presenting to the council, the committee?
The consultants, KPFF, who all along have been shepherding this and doing all the preliminary work to get the RAISE grant. So the council had gone back to them, the county had gone back to them when the price tags started going up a few months ago and asked them to please look at it again and show some ways that, some different options. Well, I'm going to talk without my visual rather than delay things.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wave it at those in the room.
They can see it online.
Okay. The timeline that they presented showed that the RAISE grant deadline is September of 2026. By then, the project has to have started, so that's 2 years and 2 months. But the immediate deadline, and something that I'm not sure anyone was that focused on, is that we have to have a final financial plan with local funding components spelled out by next summer. And so one of the difficulties, for instance, is if it might take 3 years to get the additional state funding, or another idea that was mentioned yesterday was a county ferry district, which the council can at any time just by enactment say we have county ferry district. But it turns out Kitsap County took it to the voters, and the council could decide to take it to the Kitsap County. It took 3 tries. So basically the issue is simply what kind of local funding will the council be willing to commit to by July, 12 months from now? And that's a difficult, I think more of a pole vault than a jump because of the amount of money. So that's one thing I want to point out that came out of the meeting is that the council has a year and only a year to commit to the funding package. And the second thing I wanted to point out, which would be helpful if I could get the pie chart up on the screen.
I believe that I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, Pam, you went to okay, that's the pie chart.
There's the pie chart. Two on Zoom can see it, but for some reason it will not show this
Okay.
on
So of that is the new 34-car electric hybrid ferry. There's another 14% that is in revising our terminal so it can absorb the 34-car boat. 12% is actually in deferred replacement of terminal structures. In other words, even if we do nothing about a new boat, there's $11 million of work that they see that has to happen with our current docks. Another 8 million, 9% is shoreside electrification to support charging the ferry. 2% is for passenger-only ferry floats. 2% are for additional terminal improvements, which I can tell you, knowing something about this building, They're not wrong that it could cost $2 million to do a new fire suppression system, stormwater improvements, and generator upgrades. That's just improving the existing terminals. And then they have a big item, 23%, which we have not seen before, and other project costs, and it would be worthwhile, I think, to look further into that, but that includes the fact that they'll lose a lot of revenue when they actually do this project. It includes some benefits on the mainland side that the Lummi Nation is interested in. It includes environmental mitigation, and a big item is the design, technical, and management support. The reason I bring this up is that when we hear 92 million, we're not talking about just the ferry. That's 38% of the 92 million. So if we could cut that cost in half, that would lower it by 17 million, but that would still be a big hunk of money. And going back to my first point, they only have a year, the council only has a year to figure that out, or we will lose the 25 million raise grant.
Liz did make that point that dithering about this or deferring the decision or that sort of stuff is a decision. Because they have to move forward soon if they're going to get this in place within that year timeline.
The third point I wanted to make is they only looked at 3 alternatives, and we can think of several others that are worth looking at. In particular, is there an alternative other than just replacing our existing ferry with replacing our existing ferry with a smaller electric hybrid ferry? Is there the potential, if we do that, to not require the 13 million in terminal structure improvements? All of those are engineering questions, and they're not just off the top of your head answers, but it seems to me like we should be asking the county to ask the consulting firm to give us some engineering estimates on how large of a ferry could we get and not have to change the terminal structures. That's an engineering question. Another question is just how much would it cost to have an electric diesel hybrid ferry that carry fewer vehicles? So those are 2 things that I would like to see added to their list of options. So those are my comments from the meeting. I think the thing we all need to focus on is we've got a year, and no council member is going to be happy about just imposing a ferry district on the county, evidently, even though they could. So, yeah.
We are going to have time for public comment just a minute. Thank you, Diane. Any other comments? Catherine? Other people that attended on Zoom? We are going to have some reports coming up from our ad hoc committees, the ferry and terminal ad hoc committee and the access ad hoc committee. But in the next thing that comes up on our agenda is the open session. So let me see who's signed up for open session. So the first person who signed up for open session is Jim Dickinson. So Jim, if you wouldn't mind sort of standing here so that Al can see you and hear you, that would be great. Or you could sit in a chair here if you want to.
Sure.
Thanks.
And could you put me on this?
Rich?
So, are we going to talk about this anymore?
We are.
Okay.
We are. We are going to talk about it a lot during the committee work, but we wanted to get the open session stuff in early so we didn't miss it.
Okay.
Charles asked to be added to the list.
I didn't see that you were on that.
I didn't.
Mary Ross has her hand raised.
And Mary Ross will add her if she is interested in speaking too when we get there. So we're going to start with Jim Dickinson. We will start with people that are in the room, and then we will add the Zoom members if possible. But we're going to conclude this by about 6:50 so that we have time for the rest of the work tonight. Okay, Jim.
Okay, I watched the video today and consumed going through this thing. I can only make one comment. This thing has turned into an absolute bloody disaster. There is no way out. All this one by one engineering things that came by are being discredited. Some people seem to have the idea that electricity is free. Well, it's not gonna be. And that, I think we gotta start over. This will be set two ferries Whatcom County has designed that aren't gonna be built. And the idea of going back to the little old one, it's just not there. How many people last week spent hours and hours and hours in ferry line? And
it was normal summer.
Pardon me?
It was normal summer.
Yeah, yeah.
well, but you know, that's but it's also discouraging people. That's a lot of money that you're not gonna get. The idea is to make things work better. This is not going to, it's gonna cost an incredible amount more money. I am.
So if you watched the meeting, did you have a choice of the three options they presented?
Yes, they're all bad.
All bad. You didn't like any of the options, you would
bad.
like a new option.
We're gonna have to do something different.
Okay.
It's kind of like when, you know, you want to get hit on this side of the head or that side of the head. The hull in the new ferry is extremely inefficient. The propulsion is extremely inefficient. It's extremely expensive. That it is going to, if they were to build that boat, it would produce at least 2.5 times the pollution of the current boat we have. It would burn at least 2.5 times the fuel. We're looking at, going back to what Texas said us, it could be 4 times the fuel. We're not sure. Those are my calculations. We've got to do something different here. The idea of shutting down the docks for 6 months, that's another disaster. Doesn't have to be done. We need to have a different paradigm going and forward. If we have to, buy the old high, we'll buy it 10 years. And the amount of, it's been about 40%, 42%, at least I'm calculating, lifespan. Even though it hasn't been, it's older, it's been sitting for a long time. And it's been well taken care of.
Thank you, thank you, Jim. Your 2 minutes is up, and I think many of us agree with you, and we're going to be talking about some new options coming up. Next speaker is Dave Parker.
Yeah, do I need to move?
I think that Al will follow you, but it might be better.
Magic about. I just want to suggest 2 questions to Diane in the same vein that you were talking about earlier that should be asked of Public Works and maybe of the council. The first is, I don't think everybody caught it, but Carla Sawyer from KPFF yesterday implied very strongly that to change the level of service, the requested level of service forfeits the raise grant. Period. Full stop. I believe that. I think it's rather likely, but that's not the same as being 100% true. And we need to know that because the option that is being kicked around, Todd Donovan talked about it yesterday, a smaller ferry that doesn't require significant retrofitting of the Gooseberry terminal should be on the table, but we of course like to keep the raise grant. So I feel that somebody needs to make that call to the program officer at DOT or something and absolutely be sure that we lose the raise grant if we downsize the boat. it can't be, yeah, that's probably what's gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah, that's my first comment.
Yeah.
The second is, it didn't occur to me until this pie chart here, they sort of rebin the finances compared to what was in the raise grant, and presented differently.
Yeah.
So now we have to see called out for the first time, the pink box, which is very important, the cost of bringing the Lummi Island terminal up to code. If there's no new ferry, it has to be done anyway.
Yeah.
$11 million. So my question for Public Works or for the council, where would that $11 million have come from? If not from new ferry grant money? How would that, it has to be done.
I don't believe they have a plan for that
Okay.
at this point, but we have heard, we've asked that.
But it seems a worthwhile question because it suggests there's an alternative funding source for at least that slice of the pie.
Got it. Thank you. David, Charles Bailey, you're next.
Stand here.
Yeah, yes, I believe the owl will identify you once you start speaking.
Oh, I'm Charles Bailey, and everyone has made very excellent points. 7 years ago, LIFAC recommended and County Council approved the new 34-car ferry for Lummi Island with the goal of net zero carbon emissions. And we now have before us these three options. It's taken us 7 years to get to this point. We have another year in which we've reached the drop dead deadline. So I would just like to add to what others have said, to examine other scenarios. Dave Parker has just made a really fundamental point about the raise grant. We don't want to lose the raise grant. $25 million would knock a big hole in anything we do larger than a bathtub. So I think we need to get clarity on that. My second point is that future cost analyses need to break out the cost to the taxpayer through municipal bonds, through a ferry taxing district, and for us, the cost to ferry users and increased fares once the ferry is in operation. None of these three scenarios have been analyzed from the point of the full lifetime of the boat that they're describing. We know that electric ferries are said to have lower operating costs than diesel, but there may be many other factors. If the lifetime of the ferries is 60 years, we should cost it out to 60 years. And we would know then what the future impacts on fares as well as our property taxes are going to be. My final point is that along with many other people, I would love to see us get an electric ferry. But I think now is the time to look at financial things and see what can the county afford, what can we afford, and in our corner of the universe here as we try to contribute to reducing carbon emissions. So those are the remarks I wanted to offer. A short time ago, I had a phone call from Bob Anderson who asked me to channel him. He is in Canada and sends his apologies, so I'm going to read his statement from Bob Anderson.
So now we're going to start your time over with Bob Anderson.
Okay. I am in Canada and unable to attend the Ferry Committee meeting tonight. I am aware of the options presented by Public Works. I was at yesterday's Council Committee of the Whole meeting and would like to suggest a fourth option. A reconditioned diesel ferry to be in service for perhaps 10 years. The advantage of this option are three. First, lowest cost option at a time when the county is financially challenged. Two, limits the docking structure expenses and time, thus reducing the car ferry downtime and loss of revenue. Three, allows more time to develop a well-reasoned long-range plan for the ferry replacement that includes A, clear understanding of the impact of sea level rise on dock location and design. B, time to understand the requirements of the Lummi Nation regarding renewal of the Gooseberry lease. And C, updated electrification technology and planning for PSE to install charging capacity on Lummi Island. I believe the goal of a fully electric ferry should continue to be the focus, but given all of the uncertainty of options 1 and 2 offered by Public Works, I think this option 4 should be considered. Bob Anderson.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Bob. With Bob's remarks, we have a written copy and they'll be included in the minutes. Anyone else who would like their comments included in the minutes can submit a written copy to Catherine, the secretary. Mary Ross is the next speaker. And then that will be the last speaker.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, yeah. My comment is I listened to the presentation of the committee of the whole meeting online. I have one huge concern when they were putting out that third option for a like ferry. They were giving a quote for a 15-car ferry. We cannot go down to a 15-car ferry. That is not an equivalent. So that really made me concerned if they're looking at numbers and they're giving an artificially low number and then saying it's a 15-car ferry. That is not acceptable. So going to a smaller ferry is not an okay thing. We're already maxed out with a 20-car ferry. So I'm concerned about that.
Mary, it's my understanding that the Watcom Chief is rated officially as a 15-car ferry.
16.
Right.
It's the nominal capacity.
That's what?
It's the nominal capacity of 16 and often carries 20, and the same would be true of the 15.
So basically what they're saying is a ferry the same size as the Chief, but it wouldn't, if the Chief was required, right now the Chief has a number of grandfathered abilities to function outside.
Absolutely incorrect. There is no grandfather.
I'll let you finish, Mary, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, I am really concerned that that is not okay. I know that Watcom Chief is 16-car rated using the formula, but it's got to be something a little bit bigger than the Chief. We can't go backwards. I disagree with a 34-car ferry, but I think maybe like 26-car or something like that could be helpful. And I understand the financial constraints, and I think it would be very sad to lose the race grant. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Okay, that we've exhausted the sign up for open session. And now we are going to move to the committee work part of our meeting. The first committee the first person listed in our committee work is Diane Harper, who is going to talk about the cost of implementing the fare changes and the annual ferry operations report. And I am going to
I will try to make this brief because it is not a hot topic tonight. But I want the ferry.
Is this the one you want to share?
I think that now is the time where we need to ask Public Works to accumulate the costs involved in this fare change. Some years ago, when Rayma Blake was chair of LIFAC, she was told that a fare change cost about $40,000. Now, since then, we have the no longer taking cash, credit card machines on the ferry, times have changed. So there's a number of costs associated with when you change fares, and most recently, thankfully to the council for allowing us to trade in cards, which we were never allowed to do before. However awkward it's been, it's a new benefit that we did not have before, but there's costs associated with that, staff costs. So I would like the committee to formally ask Public Works, and we go through the executive and we ask Public Works to do work, to accumulate all of the costs of this change in fares and have it available as a report to us and for the council, acknowledging that in September, it will still be an interim report. In other words, there will still be probably some more exchange dates and some more staff time. So that is my first request. I have another one, but I will just make that one in the form of a motion.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you that.
I move that the Whatcom County Ferry Advisory Committee request Public Works through the county executive's office to produce a report on the accumulated cost of changing fares, acknowledging it will be an interim report in September.
I'm going to give Catherine a minute to get that, and then I will have her repeat it, and we will ask for a second.
I wasn't sure first she reads it again, so I just can fill in what I have here.
Do you have it written down, Diane?
No, yeah, I made it up.
Formally ask Public Works through the county executive to produce a report on the accumulated costs of the rate change,
Fare change.
acknowledging that it will be an interim report as of September.
Do I have a second to that motion? Bill Buck seconds. All in favor?
Discussion.
Pardon?
Discussion.
Oh, discussion, good point.
So, lost my train of thought here just a second, a little bit. The question that comes up for me is how this has been done in the past, and whether there's information about times this has been done in the past. That's one point. The other point is you mentioned that people could never say about couldn't use their expired punch cards in the past.
Could not exchange them.
Could I exchange them, but they could use them?
We could use them for 6 months, and that's
Well,
what the prior code said.
in all the years I've been here, 30 years or something, we've never had a problem using an old punch card to ride a ferry. Ever. You didn't turn them back in. You just kept using them until they were used up.
Rich, I think that's an interesting point and one worth discussing, but it doesn't have anything to do with the desire we now have to find out how much it is costing, because in fares, we pay 55%, but the unincorporated road fund pays 45%. And I think if the council looked at the cost of an annual fare change, they might decide that perhaps not having it every year was a more cost-effective way.
That's the point we're trying to make.
Right, so I'm fine with the idea of tallying those costs, because frankly, I don't believe it could possibly cost that much to change the fare structure. It just doesn't add up to me.
What's cost a lot is the trade-in option, which is now happening each time.
The trade-in option?
The exchange, the multiple exchange options for the community to trade in their tickets.
So then the question comes up of why bother to exchange them at all? Why not, if you've got a ticket, just keep using it? Anyway, so there's a bunch of other things there. So
there's a bunch.
So it's like I'm okay with this the idea. It's just that what it really is about is all the years I've been on this committee, every piece of the county that's come out of Public Works has been crap. And I don't want anything, nothing, zero. So I think it'd be worth waiting just to see what they're going to come up with this time. But I'm not going to believe that either.
Any more discussion?
I was just trying to think what Rich is saying. Why it's a big number, and I don't know what labor costs, but it takes all those people from the county, ferry people, to exchange tickets. That's many hours.
And
I don't know
basically
what,
overtime.
overtime. So that's mainly what's in the 40 grand, I believe. The other thing is, they've already told us that on an annual basis, they want to do an increase, consumer price increase.
Right.
Whatever percentage the economy goes up. So we're not going to get out from under this, but like Rich is saying, we need some good accounting as to what it costs.
Unless they decide to amend the code, which is possible.
Yeah.
Is there any more discussion on this motion? Okay, the motion stands as written. All in favor of the motion, could you raise your hand? That is unanimous. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And you have a second?
I do have a second, the request for ferry operation reports. Every year, after the Ferry Task Force in 2011 requested that the financial information about the ferry be made public, there has been a ferry operations report published. They are in the archive on the county website, and you can go back and you can look every year at expenses and income and the balance of the ferry fund. Well, because of, and it is usually issued, for instance, this one originally was the 2021 financial report. It was issued in October of 2022. So that's after it's gone through all of the different reviews. But by being issued in the fall, it gave the council and the public a clue for the next year, and there's some projections in it. That report was not issued in the fall of 2023 for 2022.
What about,
So the last report we have on ferry finances is what happened in the year 2021. I understand that it was difficult in the summer and fall of 2023 to issue the 2022 report because that was after they had discovered that they had been misaccounting for one of the state funds. And so all those past charts and information were now at least questionable. How you're going to deal with that? Are you going to go back and you're going to change every year in the past? Well, no, because we just moved the money in 2023. So given the difficulties, the fact remains we have no financial report on 2022, and we're coming up on meeting our financial report on 2023. It's now 2024. And so what my motion is going to say is we are going to request that Public Works issue an abbreviated report for 2022. And the abbreviated report would have, I didn't make a very good copy, a summary of revenues, a history of revenues, and a history of income, of expenses, and then a ferry fund balance history, and then finally basically an accounting page, Appendix A, which puts it all in a proper form. So that's difficult in that they're going to have to decide how to treat this massive influx of funds, whether they want to go back and change things or not. But the point being that 10 years from now, we need to have on the record this information for the next question that comes along, not just skip 2022. And in 2023, I would like them to add 2 additional pages. 2022 would be pretty bare bones, no projections, just what happened before all of this.
Is that on the document I'm sharing? Look under.
Yes, thank you. And so then if you can go forward. I didn't realize it was up. Okay, perfect. So go to the next page. So this is the account, no, you're in the wrong document. Oh, well. The 2021 report had like 23 pages, and I'm not asking them to do all of these different pages that are like what is now on the screen. But for 2023, in addition to those four basic things, a summary of the history of the revenues, a summary of the history of the expenses, a summary of the history of the ferry fund, and then the accounting page, then there are two other items that I think would be very important to add, including projections. And one is a page they did have in the 2021 report, which showed the ER&R, the vessel rental, how much we had paid. And that they showed for 2018 forward, it includes dry dock, fuel, other repairs. And so in 2024, Director Cosa told us that one of the reasons for the month-long outage and dry dock and the cost of the dry dock, which the last I heard was 1.2 million, was that next year in 2025, we can get by with a shorter dry dock costing less. So for the 2023 report, I would like for them to add that page on the ER&R with some projections for the next couple of years. Is it gonna keep being 1.2 million, or is it going to go down? And then finally, one other thing to add is the 2021 report had ferry ridership chart. And I think it would be very important to go ahead. What we have is through 2021 with an estimate for 2022 that they made in August of 2022. And if we could get that updated so it shows ridership for 2022, ridership for 2023, and an estimate for ridership in 2024 as estimated based upon what they know now, basically. So, anyway.
Is that an emotion?
Yeah, so the motion is, so the motion is that the Whatcom County Ferry Advisory Committee request,
And we do have that written
down, okay, request, and they're in bullet points. A minimum report for 2022 that would update the income summary page plus, and I just say similar pages to 5, 6, and 7 of the 2021 report without future projections. Just the facts through 2022 before all of these changes.
Okay, if you're not gonna do this exactly, I need you to state out exactly what the motion is.
That the Whatcom County Ferry Advisory Committee requests that Public Works produce a minimum report for 2022. I should have written it, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That would update the 2021 report, including pages 5, 6, and 7 of the 2021 report, plus the income summary page without.
It doesn't need to be this explicit.
Projections.
Perfect.
Can we just ask them to please issue a minimum report for the 2022 year?
I think we need to at least be specific on the amount of information on that minimum amount of information.
Why does it have to be a minimum report? Why can't it be a full report, just like all the other years?
Because the projection part is no longer have anything to do with anything.
See, the report for 2022 would have projected 23 and 24, and there's just no point.
Yeah.
There's also no point in given that it was 23 pages or 15 pages of reports, there's an awful lot of other kinds of things they reported on, and what I think we need to be interested in is just a historical record where we have the income and the revenue. And
So let's say that. So we want a historical, but we want 2022 to be only what happened. And for 2023, we want it to mirror previous reports. And then once they don't give us what we want, we go back to them and say it didn't. I mean, I don't know, but it's a two-page motion.
Okay, well, so I'm okay with that version of the motion. I think getting a little bit into discussion, I think they can go ahead and issue a 2022 report. I think it highly unlikely that they're able to generate a 2023 report with projections because of the current lawsuit. I don't think they're going to want to go through the effort of generating that report until they know how that's going to go.
Right, let's ask for it.
I'm just, as part of the discussion, saying I would find it an acceptable response to say, we'll give you the 2022 report soon. The 2023 report is some months off in the offing.
We'll think about September, October, that's always the case, so, yeah.
Okay, so can you repeat what you just motion you're trying to make today? Please issue a minimum report for 2022 that would update, what do you have now?
The income, revenues, and ferry farm, and the income statement for 2022. So just 3-4 items.
Okay, we have a lot still to do tonight on votes, and so maybe you could write this motion down and bring it to the next meeting.
Or maybe, actually, we passed the first motion, which I think they need to know soon, so they will start paying attention and to accumulating those costs. So indeed, this motion can wait. I'll bring it next time. And since you've heard all of this discussion, I'll just give you the motion next time.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're so welcome. Okay, so the Ad hoc Access Committee has no report at this time. We've sort of been on hold. We are collecting some data with the current healthcare with a survey that we're doing that is going to give us some information. And starting in the fall, once it's clearer what we're going to be looking at, we will continue collecting access data for extended outage that will likely occur in 2027 because we have to replace existing docks. We will now defer to the Ferry and Terminal Ad hoc Committee. They have a proposal they would like to make, and I want to make sure they have time to do that.
Okay.
Tom?
Is it all right if I stand? I get muscle cramps. That's why I've been hobbling around. Okay. So obviously the things that came out of the KPFF proposal that were at the meeting yesterday is new to us. And as Pam asked me before, what would I like to present tonight for ad hoc committee? And I said, you know, until we digest this, we can't really come up with a game plan to say, what about this, what about that? So since that time, we sat down briefly before this meeting and we hacked out a few things that were questions for KPFF and the county to, basically there's two parts to what's going on here as we've seen tonight. You have the part about, well, we aren't going to do what's on the drawing board or do that in some other form of a variation of the same thing. It all comes down to number two, then finances. So I guess, as John Scanlon was saying, unless we look further into, and as Charles said, we can't lose the raise grant and see this thing go forward in any other than buying a used beater boat to get us through. I mean, we come down to that low of a situation unless we make this thing work. So what we talked about ahead of time was on the sheet, the KPFF, you know, 20-some sheets. This is the key one here, the two project scenario and in-kind option. And as we read through that, the thing that we had of concern is really, this is kind of quick and dirty, but we need better definition of what is single phase with electrification. And then, of course, then what they're saying is, what would be the projected cost of that? It all goes back to the money trail. The second thing, same with deferred electrification. Replace the Wacom Chief with a 34-car hybrid diesel propulsion. So the first one was a battery electric. So we've lost the diesel in the first one, which that's awkward. Second one, the diesel's still in there, but so deferred electrification. Okay, they've kind of explained that one, but what does that cost? And then the in-kind one. So Kurt and I talked about, so the in-kind thing, as Mary Ross was saying, 15 cars, or whether that's 16 cars, it's still basically a replacement for the Wacom Chief. And I think what they're saying here is that if we're ready to let the raise grant go away, then we could, it's one of two things. We either build a very inexpensive diesel ferry, smaller, or we find a really good used ferry and retrofit it a little bit, but it's all diesel. We're not getting to the spirit of what Charles is talking about. This started with many years of talking about diesel electric hybrid and that of course ties in with what the county's expectations are for, I think it's the 2030 standard of where we're going with pollution in the county. So that brings me, so the in-kind thing is, that needs more explanation as to, what are they talking about? In 2018, and I don't have anything to hand out, Kurt came up with this by researching it recently, that you could come up with a diesel electric hybrid propulsion ferry, like we're trying to do, and scale it down to a 24-car ferry. And still do it with a number of lanes instead of maybe, well, I won't get into lanes and how they arrange it, but you could arrange it to a point where you could use the existing docks. So it's a skinny one, and because it's 24 car, it's not so long as the ferry that's on the drawing board. So, and as Pam pointed out earlier, we've still got to replace anything that's wooden pilings and what on either side, it's got to go, right? So that's what, 11 million? So, okay, going back to our brief meeting ahead of time, we drew Diane into the meeting 5 minutes before we started this meeting. And we realized that for our group to do anything meaningful from here on in, we need a real financial person. I mean, we can talk a little bit of the technical things on the ferry and ask the right questions to KPFF for the county. But we need to understand, just like a year from now, we've got to have the path forward on the finances, or we're going to use the raise grant. And like John Scanlon was saying, what about getting the legislature to figure out some money, just like Guaymas got? We ought to get similar amounts, but that takes time. So you put all this stuff down on paper, but it may not, a year from now, be ready to, yeah, we may not get that line item from the state for whatever reason, because this capital gains thing goes away, or who knows, okay, so that is, and we've actually come up with a sheet which I'm not going to hand out today, but it ties directly in with this. And we would like actually to talk more to Public Works, and hopefully KPFF as a separate, because we've met with them a couple of times. We'd like to do a similar thing to talk about this, because it's like the conversation we talked about before. Unless you sit down face to face, we don't know about what's possible, what are expectations, on and on and on. So that's kind of.
Is that 24-car ferry a hybrid ferry?
This diesel hybrid electric.
It's a hybrid electric. Yeah,
in other words, we're doing a skinny down version of the current one on the drawing boards.
Which is a 37?
34.
34.
Yeah.
So that's 10 cars left.
Yeah.
And skinnier to fit in the current dock.
But there's another question too. It goes back to what Charles was saying about timeline. Think about this. In essence, we'd be taking the current thing off the table, and you're starting with a clean sheet of paper. So what more does that cost in engineering costs? I mean, so anyway, I think I've raised the points that we're kind of wrestling with now. So the key thing would be if we could sit down with Public Works and talk about a little bit of this. It'll take us a little more time to digest the KPFF document, but we're understanding the gist of it. And So I'll entertain any questions. I kind of probably jumped around a little bit, but you can see the gravity of the situation. Changes will happen in some form. What is it? And that goes back to what is our expectation? Are we going to hang with the diesel hybrid electric? Or are we going to say diesel's okay if we can get it done for $25 million plus the docks?
Yeah, and we go for electric when you
15
get power
15 years
ready
from
to
now.
electrify both docks with the right amount of power.
Right. Well, I guess my question to you people is what we're just talking about a good basis to talk to the county public works? And is there some other point that you would want us to take forward to them if we can get an audience with them? And Dave, I didn't have adequate time before the meeting to really talk to you, but any additional thing I should be looking at?
My comment would be, I tend to think in terms of decision trees. And
In terms of what?
decision trees,
Right.
turn left, turn right. If we accept the premise that we want to keep the raise grant because it's a lot of money and we don't know where we could get a similar amount.
Right.
I've raised the question already about whether we can keep it with this reduced level of service, i.e. a smaller boat. I'm reluctant to speak for the Department of Transportation, but having read the call for proposals that led to that grant, the language in there, I feel confident in saying the reason we got the grant was because we committed to an electric ferry.
Right.
So the chances of retaining that $25 million for a diesel ferry are functionally zero. So we can't mix and match those things. If we're going to go on a diesel path, we don't have to worry about what the raise grant is on the table, because it's not. If we want to try to keep the raise grant, we have to continue to go down some kind of electric path and see if that's even feasible. Maybe it's not. But this KPFI presentation, it was more confusing than helpful. There are different options, for me, but anyway.
It was challenging, I have to say. I know there's one person in the audience that had comments. Rebecca, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I haven't been in all these meetings, but you mentioned that the budget is 92 million. It's not clear, is that 92 million for all three of those scenarios, each one at the same cost? I mean, that was where it seems like that wasn't very clear. No, there's very big differences between them, and that should obviously be a consideration.
Yeah, and in their report, when they included the different funding sources, they brought that down to the level of how much money will the county have to find.
Right.
And in essence, that's the real issue, is where is the county going to come up with their share? But the 92 million was for the current project as proposed. And so, in fact, they showed that it costs more to do a deferred electric because, and it costs far less to do overall a replacement ferry, the same diesel ferry, the same size as Watauga. But then once you subtracted out the raise grant on the electric versions, and you subtracted out what the state has already committed and what the state might commit, then it turned out that the current 92 million resulted in about the same amount of money needed from the county as just buying a new 15-car ferry.
So they're, okay, that's.
But that, as Jim has brought up, and as Tom just brought up, we don't really know any of the details about that pricing, that ferry. I mean, this is a whole new thing that they've just thrown in.
Yeah.
Just to add to what you might be asking from Public Works, I think you need to try to get them to focus on Puget Sound energy, starting with how much electricity do each of these boats consume. And then what is Puget Sound Energy's actual strategy for delivering that amount of electricity to either of both terminals? Because without that information, it's just another uncertainty. The other point I should have made earlier is that some of the Skagit money, $10 million of the 24 they received, was from the Climate Commitment Act. This is revenues from the carbon auction system that the state has been implementing now. It's now in its second year. So far, it's generated $1.3 billion in revenue for climate-related stuff. So, yes, it's difficult to get money out of the legislature, but on the other hand, there's this new stream of money.
Did we not apply for that? We haven't applied for that money before?
No, not to my knowledge. On the third hand, the repeal of the Climate Commitment Act is on the November ballot, Initiative 2117. If this passes, then Skagit County is in a pickle because they will have to return the 10 million.
I believe right now Skagit County Council had rejected the bids for their new ferry.
Right.
And I believe that currently they don't have a project. And if they don't have a project, they would have to return that money anyway.
Exactly, that's exactly true, they don't have.
I think that this report yesterday actually goes into some detail about the Grain and Salmon Ferry, and that may or may not be up-to-date information.
I do have one other point I forgot. The one I wrote down is the one I forgot to make. It's my understanding, so the commitment in funding secured to date is $40.3 million. 25 raise grant, 10 crab grant, 5.3 move on Washington, which is a pretty good start,
Yeah.
but it's far short of $90 million. My understanding is that the other two funding streams, the crab and the move on Washington, were secured with an implicit promise that we were building an electric ferry. So I'm not sure it's possible.
Liz did tell me yesterday that if we did take that option of the 15-car control ferry,
Yeah,
we would not lose the grant money.
she's sure of that.
Yes, she said that we would absolutely keep the grant money, so we would not lose it.
Okay, so we have just enough money to repair the wood pilings and on the Lummi side.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah, no, we can keep using the.
I'm surprised.
I would like Kurt to be able to say things he's
Yeah, thank
key to the
you.
process.
John, are you still online?
He is.
Yeah.
He's there.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I've been talking with Elizabeth about this. I'm not as worried about the crab money. It's the raise money. My understanding is that conversation, I believe, has been had. Elizabeth has been doing that outreach and isn't as worried about the crab money.
John?
I just want to say as well, this is the type of creative thinking that you all are great at, and I love this. So thank you for this. We need more of this to figure this out, because thank you, Diane, for pointing out the timeline earlier that, we have until July of next year to figure out this financing. It's tight, and we got to get creative on this.
John, this is Kurt Estel. I have a question for you. Can you arrange with Public Works a meeting for Tom and I and other of the committee members to understand what is included, what equipment, what design is included in a single phase and a deferred phase? We have no detail on what's being offered to us. We haven't had any information. And if you could arrange a meeting with Elizabeth so that we can understand what components are available in each of those designs, then we could be more articulate in our questions about whether one is preferable to the other.
But isn't it the same boat design for both?
No, you have different equipment.
Pardon me?
You may have different equipment. We need to know what they're offering us in each option.
You can't assume it's the same.
Pardon me?
You can't assume it's the same. Maybe if they met, they would find out it's the same, but
in a short hour meeting, John, we could determine what the design is that they're proposing.
Okay. Elizabeth and I are driving to Point Roberts tomorrow for a meeting, so we have a lot of time in a county car tomorrow, so I will ask that question.
And
she doesn't have Nexus, so I'm gonna have to wait in the slow line.
Yeah. As an add-on to that discussion, could you discuss the raised grant with her and see who she has in mind to determine whether we keep the raised grant if we have a different designed length or width, but we retain the diesel electric hybrid? Can we retrain?
I'll ask that.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
I'll ask that question as well, and I forget who had the comment earlier about getting on the phone with the program managers and seeing what we can work out. And I also wonder if, I don't know if we've had any conversations with our congressional delegation, and I think in particular about Senator Cantwell, who was helpful on this, and Congressman Larson. They may be able to be helpful on this, and I think it's worth doing that outreach and asking some of those questions and see if they can be helpful for us.
Right.
Because I think there's a lot of folks who want to make sure that Inflation Reduction Act is working well for communities. So there may be some good incentives there, and timely incentives over the next 3 months or so.
John, this is Tom Philpott again. I've got one final question for you. You've been very creative in coming up with these ideas for how we can tap into additional things like state monies. Could you also, you don't have to talk about it now, but you've talked about ferry taxing district in the past. And apparently we don't have to go to the county, the rural county, for a vote. There are certain things that the county can put in place. So the question for you is, how would you approach the county council to ask for that limited amount of ferry taxing district that's easy, relatively easy to put in? But then how does that figure into a year from now? Can we bank on that at any dollar amount to make our package full?
Thank you. So on the ferry district question, I've only heard, when this has come up, a handful of council members respond on the idea. Yesterday, Councilmember Donovan seemed to indicate that he would not support doing this in a councilmanic fashion, where the council would vote on this. He would want to see this go to the people. I have a good relationship with him, I think. So, I'll have that conversation with him. But I forget the threshold on that vote. Does anyone recall? Diane, you may know. Is it a simple majority of 4, or would we have to have a super majority on that one?
I believe it is just a simple majority. It's just a county council regular action, but I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that is true. I can look it up.
I think one of the reasons Skagit did get the money that they may not keep is that they do have a countywide ferry district in place.
No.
Oh, they don't?
No, Kitsap County is the only county that has done that, and they did it through a vote, countywide vote.
Gotcha, okay.
Skagit County had a different taxing district that we don't have, but it's not a ferry.
It's not a countywide ferry, okay, got it.
King County does too.
That's one point that we can make to the council, though. If we're going to the state for more money, I think we would be in a stronger position if we could say that we had done everything the county could do to raise funds for this project including enacting a countywide ferry taxing district to help fund the system. And even after doing that, if we still need extra funds, we have a stronger leg to stand on.
So just to say a few other things on the tax district, the ferry district, if I can.
Pardon me?
Can I just say a few more words on the ferry district idea?
Sure.
So, you know, for me, I also want to wait until we see what happens in November with the Healthy Children's Fund. That's a priority for me. I want to see what happens there before doing anything else on taxes. So, you know, once we know the results of that, I'm very much willing to look into this. And it's the kind of thing where, you know, you'd have to start counting votes. And due to quorum rules, I can only talk with 2 other council members on any given topic. So I think if the idea of a ferry tax district is of interest to the community, I would suggest that folks start having individual meetings with other council members to start talking about that idea. And then the other thing, just, you know, my personal take on that is, you know, I think that elected officials are elected to make decisions and should make decisions that are under their authority. That's my take on things. Other people I know on the council, you know, like to put more things on the ballot. And I think it's more of a philosophy issue, but I think it's always worth having the conversation. So because I can only talk with 2, everybody here can talk with all 7 of us. So that's what I would encourage if you think that's a good route to go, is to have those conversations and to start them early.
Can you share with us which 2 you're going to talk to so we know who to talk to?
Oh, good question. You know, I guess I have already talked with Todd about this, so I can only choose one more now. So I'll let you know. Though in an open public session, I can talk to all 7. So.
Oh, very good.
Privately.
If I could make a comment, yesterday you brought, John, you brought up the fact that a county ferry district, the tax income from that could in fact, by council action, which taken a code change, pay for operating costs on the ferry that are currently borne by the unincorporated area road fund. And Director Costa came back and pointed out that there would be $2 or $3 million of carrying costs each year on that, on like a bond issue. But the point I would like to make is that the amount that a countywide ferry district could raise could be sufficient to pay that $2 or $3 million and a good portion, if not all, of the unincorporated area road fund operating costs. So I think it would be worth looking at the different levels of taxation it would take to both carry the bonds and alleviate the strain on the road fund.
I would like to wrap up our session, but Jim had a comment, and the 2 ladies here have to get the ferry at 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, for one thing, as you know, that I'm a proponent of the Hyde plan that we wrote down was $100,000 worth of work done by the local people. It was sacked by the county executive who wanted a brand new ferry. Now, I wish people would actually take their time and read it. It's also a 34-car ferry for the state of Washington. That might meet the 34-car part and allow us to keep the grant. Consider that. Now, the thing is so bloody cheap in comparison that, you know, if we got it for 5, 10, 15 years, it would really help out. Then we could actually figure out what we want to do.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, it's yours.
Okay, I believe that we're going to have to wrap this up. I would like to thank everybody for coming. I would especially like to thank Kim Boone for her assistance tonight, and in previous meetings, Kim is retiring from the county, and this will be her last meeting with us. So in the future, we will be meeting by Zoom only. So everyone should always bring their laptops because we will be hosting this by Zoom and in person as well, because that's required by the Public Meetings Act. So thank you all for coming, and we'll, one more thing for Rich.
Got my hand up for half an hour. I'll try to be really, really quick, okay? So there's some other things that have not been talked about tonight, or some not ever.
Would you like to add them to the meeting on the 28th?
Take 2 minutes and speak your piece.
I can do it in a minute. So several things that have not ever been discussed in this whole process for years now, that are worth looking at. Number one, there's something called the Marine Construction and Repair Price Index. Until the middle of 2022, that index had gone up at a fairly regular and relatively low rate for 20-some years. In the middle of 2022, I believe, probably having something to do with COVID, having something to do with quarantines around the world, and all of the shipping and stopped and so forth. Something about that shot those prices up so that they've gone up an enormous amount. And just on the basis of that, it seems reasonable when discussing the raise grant with DOT that kind of inflation is very specific to these circumstances and was all done before, I believe, those requests had come in. So that could be an argument for letting us fool around with some of the numbers. The second thing is, in economics, there's a thing called demand management. For years, when I was commuting from the island to town to go to work, lots of people had a car on both sides. You park the car in the morning, you take a ferry across and walk on, you get into your car, just park over there. The lack of parking to allow people to choose whether they want to park on the other side or take a vehicle would have a significant impact on the vehicle demand for a ferry. And then finally, my fantasy is a 24 to 26 car electric ferry made of aluminum and built in Bellingham. I'm just saying.
Thank you. We'll see you all on the 28th. Thank you for coming. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you again.
I like the idea.
Recording stopped.